Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode of Weaving Myths Season 5. We're back. We're here to talk about tabletop role playing games and everything related to playing them online. I'm Eric, and joining me tonight are Colin and, and Powderhorn.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see you all here. Hopefully, we get to have fun tonight.
Ooh, we're all staff at Mythweavers, one of the largest play by post gaming websites in existence and home to the largest repository of online RPG character sheets anywhere on the web. As always, we do our best to air an episode of Weaving Mist live every other Saturday. For those of you who have been keeping score for the summer, we have not hit that mark because, well, we'll talk about that later as to what we've been up to. Starting this week, we're transitioning from Twitch to YouTube for our live streams. And today we're joined by the impeccable YouTube chat. Hello, chat.
Hi, Chad.
Right. Colin, what are we up to in season 5?
Colin, you are not able to be heard right now. I can hear you. I can hear you. But Tiffany, unfortunately, cannot hear those pearls of wisdom that are dropping from you.
Technology changes. What are we going to do? It's really Colin's fault.
It is. While we're waiting for him to sort that out, I wonder if we want to push ahead, Eric, or do we want to perhaps digress somehow?
Well, I could just start by saying all the things that he was saying. It'd be like Milli Vanilli here.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. So season 5 is our season of the genre. We're here grouping games by their form or style or subject matter. Ultimately, the goal is to help get you guys a shared understanding of what you're talking about when you go advertise or find resources for a game or go to play. Um, and in season 5, we're covering a lot of ground because there are a lot of genres. We'll talk about settings. We'll talk about the systems that lend themselves to particular genres, but really how that all relates back to what Mythweavers is all about, which is play by post. Colin, is your audio back?
I don't know. Tiffany, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
I mean, I can hear you, but you know, I don't know how much good that does us. But while we're waiting on that,
Oh,
Tiffany can.
All right, there we
So,
go.
success.
I don't
so
want to tell you what it was, Eric. You know that little transition button?
Uh huh.
That also applies to if you update and fix sources.
Uh huh. Dang it.
I know.
okay. Well, we're back, so that's good. Colin, did you want me to jump in for kind of
Take it.
the introduction?
Take it. This is
Okay,
the one you want anyway.
so this is actually the one I want. For those who are regular watchers, you may recognize me as a semi new face. I did one of the earlier ones about urban fantasy, which was a brutal bait and switch performed by the other staff members because I was promised low fantasy. And I can talk intelligently about low fantasy, which is what we're doing tonight. Whereas the last time I was really shooting from the hip on urban fantasy, which I know little about. But I faked it really well, I think.
Well enough to get callback.
I know, well enough to get called back. So uh, today we're talking about low fantasy, and low fantasy is a kind of a genre that is near and dear to my heart. I think we may actually have some disagreement as to how low fantasy is defined and built. Um,
You mean
but
like
with that,
every other argument over genres?
Pretty much.
yeah, which makes for good programming, I guess.
We're
Um,
here to we're here to duke it out.
yeah. So, what is low fantasy?
So,
I mean, I can go on, but I mean, Colin?
Side 1, in the red corner, it's your real world with fantasy elements intruding thereupon.
Which sounds a lot like urban fantasy. But it can also be fantasy where the power level is reduced. You'll see a lot of games on Mythweavers that are very high-powered games. Um, I have never seen a character get over seventh level because it doesn't. That goes all the way back to first edition AD&D, where leveling was a much slower process. But even in the modern settings, I've never seen a character get that high level because to me it's just not as interesting. Like if you can do everything, then where's the struggle at? And
Right.
maybe high fantasy is something that will be discussed later. Um, but it can also just be like a very low magic setting, and I think there's a lot of really interesting things that can be done there.
That's a lot of overlap there with the red corner in your blue corner, but the red corner is the literary definition. This is the one that people talk about when they write books. The other one is kind of a gaming type definition because you're talking about levels and power and but I think they can agree on the magic is not something that ordinary people wield. Magic is something that is preternatural, oogie boogie type. You want to stay away from it.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Eberron, but I know many people have been talking with me about it recently. And it sounds like Eberron is the polar opposite of this, where magic is so prevalent that they're using it for like essentially what we use like cell phones for now today. But on the opposite end, you are talking, to me, something that feels much closer to the historical record, but with just a little garnish of magic on top.
Yeah, and intrusion fantasy is something that's kind of been in the literary world for I don't know ever basically. You've got all of the old tales about fairies and sprites and hobgoblins and things that go bump in the night or at least wander around the forest when you're alone.
Hmm.
And of course, anyone who's been at sea, which ironically I don't think applies to too many of us here, despite our Navy background.
Yeah, it's true. This
Our
is this is the
I
podcast with all the Navy vets and staff.
Right, and the most senior of them has a grand total of 4 weeks of sea time.
More than us.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly 0 days of sea time. Joined the Navy to try to get on the boat. Like I thought the Patrick O'Brien stuff, which is not low fantasy, that's more historical fiction. Uh,
hmm
I thought that was going to be the life. Turns out that wasn't the case. But
tough you went out with the Marines.
yeah, and that was fun. For bizarre definitions of fun, I guess.
But if you're at sea, you're going to expect sea monsters.
Sea monsters. Got to have sea monsters.
Nessie.
Beware dragons lie beyond these borders.
hmm Um,
The mythological stuff. It's funny this comes up. I've actually recently started playing a game called Hades, which sounds to be very popular right now for good reason. It's a lot of fun. But like those Greek and Roman myths where the gods are coming down and kind of interjecting themselves, and they're using these, um, religious descriptions as to why things happen the way they are, because they don't have that knowledge base to understand, why they actually are. That in and of itself can be considered both fantasy.
like Stargate is almost low fantasy by that definition.
I can't speak intelligently to Stargate because while you highly recommend it, I have never actually watched it.
Sacre bleu. Those guys are terrible. All
I,
right.
I'm reading the chat on the side, and we're actually going to address some of this stuff because some of this actually
Yeah.
comes up.
Yep.
Yeah, Zeus definitely interjected himself. He was personally involved in a lot of
Interjection over and over
People,
again.
Mhm.
places, and yeah, just like I don't think we can talk about Zeus and remain like within the rules of Mythweaver. Uh,
No, no, not the actual accurate version. No, we can't.
yeah,
Nope.
no, I don't think so.
Or
I'm
Freya. We gotta stay away from Freya as well. We gotta be careful there.
Oh
oh yeah.
yes.
Although, kind of bringing it back a little bit, you mentioned the literary stuff, and you see this in literature, and you have the legends of King Arthur with the Sword and the Stone and Excalibur, um, Honestly, one of the best renditions of the Arthurian legends was from Bernard Cornwell, where it felt very historical. Um, and he put magic in there, but you were never sure if it was magic or if stuff just kind of worked out the way the people doing the magic
Was it luck
said they
or
were.
yeah?
Yeah, like you don't know if they were just kind of arranging things so they happened the way they said they would, or if it truly was magic. And I thought that was a really cool way to do it.
Yeah. Um, so, your Arthurian legends have some elements of kind of occultism because the whole King Arthur thing was kind of a
Right.
vague allegory for the Christianization of Britain, but occult persists to today. So you've got Indiana Jones,
Oh yes.
touches on low fantasy a lot. The Cthulhu mythos is definitely in this corner.
Then you've got more recent popular media as well. The first one that came to mind to me was Bright, which, okay, regardless how you felt about it, it was a low fantasy setting. Magic was, oh my god, there's a magic wand, everyone's gonna kill each other trying to get it. Could
It
they
was
have
the
done a
MacGuffin.
lot better with that movie? God, yes. But, yeah.
Que sera, sera.
Eric,
We
I'm gonna
never.
let you take this next one because it's gonna set me up for what I
Oh, we're
was.
gonna have an argument.
Oh yeah, I mean you see in the notes, the
Yeah,
immediate
yeah.
thing that comes after that.
So I
Easy
mean, if
there,
we're gonna talk,
Tiff. Easy there.
yeah, if we're gonna switch over to the low powered world, then we got to argue about where does the low power come from. Um, when you're talking about it from a strictly role-playing game sense, the power levels is defined by the mechanic, and so there are systems where it's enforced that there are no magic users. There are systems where it's enforced that if you want to play a magic user, you basically are setting your character up for a descent into darkness, madness, whatever. Um, those tend to be more common in the low fantasy type of gaming experience. Um,
Now, I actually disagree on this. Kind of the thing we're talking about here is whether it's the system or the setting that defines whether it's low power. I truly think it is defined by the setting. I think you can take any system and make it high powered, but it's the setting that defines. I think that defines it. Whether basically what are the consequences for what you're doing. If there is no magic in the system, then obviously you're not going to have magic. Um, but if
yeah,
there is, you can still have such a pariah effect that socially, it forces it to be a low magic setting. You can take a high powered system and you can slow things down so people don't level as quickly. But that's more of a system mechanic. But even just as far as the idea of where magic comes from, how magic is defined, how the pantheon of gods interacts. All those things are setting things that help to define a low power setting.
Right.
yes, but you talk about scaling down some of the higher power systems. You got to be very careful because you can scale character power down. No, you can't have that. You can't have that. You can't have that. Um, but most of the opposition is defined by expecting that the characters are going to have those things when they get to those points. And so you find yourself doing a lot of extra work on the, say, the monster manual side of things if you're going to scale down the characters without um, putting them in a position where they're going to fail all the time.
I hear what you're saying, although I disagree because if the setting is one where you're not going to come across a beholder, then you're not worried about scaling down a beholder. If it's the setting that's going to define whether something is low powered or high powered, then you simply wouldn't put them. You wouldn't put this like dragon in the middle of the thing because like dragons aren't a thing, right? Or if they are, seeing one is kind of a earth shattering effect, which I hope you're aware from the game that we're in together.
Yes. However, the challenge is that it's not just like there are monsters down here and there are monsters up there. They run along that continuum, and as the monsters are scaling up, they're gaining those magical powered effects because in many systems because that's how they're designed to scale. And so those monsters become either unusable or you have to go do a lot of your own groundwork to try and make sure that they still fit within the pattern. Because the other thing that you can then happen even at low levels, okay, so you take away all their magic stuff. Now these are curb stomped by the characters because the characters are good at only one trick. It's the only trick they have to be good at. And all of the monsters are designed to be weak to that particular trick.
I hear what you're saying. To me, what it sounds like is an issue where you have a low power fantasy party encountering a high power fantasy encounter. If you're not, I think if you have a setting that is low power, they shouldn't be having encounters like that because that's not consistent with the setting. I think that in my opinion,
Okay.
one opinion.
Yeah, let me go back to and try and provide a specific example. If you have characters who are leveling up at the outset, level 1, orcs are a fair challenge. By the time they hit level 6, orcs are no longer a challenge, but there's not something that's a level 6 version of the orc. Because the level 6 version of the orc is another monster in the monster manual that has magical powers.
See, even level
Or it's
6
an
to
orc with a
me
class.
to me, level 6 sounds like high power already. Um,
Oh, that's
yeah,
heresy.
yeah. I mean, that's yeah. I've seen one character get to level 7 in my 20 years of playing D&D, and only one party get past level 5.
See,
Uh,
Matt and Chad agrees with me. A level 6 orc challenge is an orc with class levels.
Right, but as I
yeah,
said,
that's not an idea.
it goes back to you as the GM putting the work in. Then you have
Oh,
less
absolutely.
ability to just pull directly from the manual and plug and play.
Yeah, I totally
Absolutely.
don't just random gen stat blocks. That would be lazy.
Yeah. See, I guess I would. The question of how low is low power?
Maybe we should explore that as we talk about specific systems and
Yeah,
settings.
yeah. I think we've kind of beat that horse. Colin, why don't you talk about some of the other stuff so we don't have to hear my voice anymore?
But you're talking so well. Alright, so low power fantasy settings, you've got a few different ones that, just right off the top, you've got Conan, you've got Lord of the Rings, you've got E6, Iron Heroes, and a few other systems on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll talk about Conan and Lord of the Rings. I think we kind of hit the E6 about the head and shoulders there, because to Powderhorn's point, if you're getting up above 6th level in most D&D games, you're starting to have access to, we'll call them world-altering powers.
Yeah, and, like I think they have Fireball at 5th level or something. Like that's kind of a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Right. Um, yeah, the commonality of magic is something that we'll explore as we talk about the setting, because that really is what drives it, to Greg's point. Um, Iron Heroes is a system. It's actually a D20 variant system, second on our list here. So maybe I'll just jump straight to that. Haha. Steal the script. Run with it. It's a variant on 3.5 edition D&D. Basically what they did is said, okay, we're going to make 10 or 12 different martial classes, each with their own different shtick. And then we're going to strip out all the magic classes and leave them with one. And that one has limited power, so it's much more balanced compared to where the rest of the classes were to begin with. There's no more clerics or druids that can just put everyone to shame, or wizards who can just rewrite the universe.
Right.
I have heard that complaint from people playing D&D. That the martial classes feel like they might be left behind. So if you have that feeling, maybe Iron Heroes is something worth checking out.
Right. It's got a lot of good points to it. I've played it. Actually played it on the Weave with Shadowstalker as the game master. I think we played it very briefly in a Gen Con. No, we actually changed that out for Warrior Rogue and Mage because it was just easier to do at the tabletop with no prep. But yeah, the downside to Iron Heroes, why we didn't play it at the tabletop, is because to make everyone unique, they added a lot of rules and mechanics to cover those special martial things that each one of those classes could do, which is great because everyone was good at their own thing. But if you're a GM, you really needed to read all of that and consume all of those rules and internalize them before you could really effectively run the game. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you're just an absent wizard who can pick up things and know everything there is to know.
No,
that's why high power. That's why high power fantasy can be so frustrating for us mere martial types, because wizards just once they learn everything, like man, what's there left for me?
Wizards are man-portable field artillery. And they're not, once they get fireball, they're not mortars, they're howitzers.
Oh, self-mobile.
Yeah. I actually worked with artillery with the Marines. And I will say,
I might have known that.
All artillery is man-portable. It's just a question of how many men.
That's why you have Marines.
Yeah.
Hey guys, hump this over the next hill.
Tie some lines to it, pull, you'll be fine.
There's a famous quote from, I believe it's the Revolution, where this British general is saying, "Anywhere a goat can go, a man can go. Anywhere a man can go, he can drag a gun."
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Anyway, pulling away from our tangent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Iron Heroes doesn't have its own setting. That's, I think, the main weakness from a running it on the Weave. You're gonna have to pick up your own setting and run with it, whether it's Arthurian or Greek and Roman or I don't know, Conan.
I wonder how often pre-made settings are utilized on the Weave. I see some games run them, but it does seem like there's a lot of homegrown going on.
It's kind of we always have the discussions about ebb and flow of activity on the site depending on time of year, but we also seem to have a ebb and flow that's less predictable with homebrew versus like existing settings.
Right. I mean, you'll see a fair number of games that are set in Galarian that are Pathfinder.
Yep.
You'll have a fair number of Eberron games that just come up because people love their high tech, high magic fantasy.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I agree. People do really seem to like the high magic, high fantasy, and I think part of my mission tonight is going to be selling people on low fantasy, because I think there's a lot of fun that you can have with
it. Yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir here because I like those kind of games myself. But
okay, French Indian.
And then
War.
You've got, if we get outside of fantasy, often you have, I don't know, Star Wars. That's a very well established setting. I think it's probably a 50-50, and it kind of depends on the system whether you're using an established setting or not.
Well, speaking of established settings, kind of jumping around a little bit. One of the potentially low fantasy settings. It sounds, I guess, low power fantasy is, to use the correct terminology, because the One Ring is based on The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. Basically, that obviously comes with its own setting pre-made. If you're familiar with Tolkien's work, you're familiar with the setting of the one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the reams and reams of paper, cut down the forest each time to print out an anthology.
Yep.
But basically, it's an RPG that's out there. It heavily utilizes one of the least beloved of dies. Basically, it just runs on D12s. Again, the least beloved. Like, I love D12s. They feel so nice in the hand, and you just never use them. This seeks to rectify that. It's just the D12s and the D6s. Basically, you use your D12 as your base. Like, hey, I'm going to try to do this, and then your D6 are basically like add-on dice if you have like extra abilities and stuff. They have their own dice for the game. I looked at them. Frankly, they looked more confusing to me than just using like regular dice. I think it was because it used that sort of like elvish font, and that's just not me. If you
Hey,
look around,
Greg.
this is not an elvish.
Greg, start
Yes.
yelling about kids on your lawn next.
Yeah.
And how back when you were a kid, you got one set of gaming dice and that was all you could get, and there weren't fancy styles.
I, I do have one set of gaming dice. It is a nice set of gaming dice. They're like solid metal. That way, like when you're using them.
You're a goddamn elf.
I don't know about that.
So for anyone not familiar,
you saw me in Kalamazoo. I'm kind of a bigger dude.
No, so for anyone that's not familiar, there's three types of players that have been categorized, as races. So you've got, in regards to gaming dice, so you've got halflings are the person that steals dice from the other players and doesn't bring their own. Elves are the ones that have, one or two really, really fancy sets. And then you've got the goblins. Shiny math rocks make click-clack noise. Needs the more. All's the more.
This is my set from my original red box D&D, which is sitting up there on the shelf. Still have it. I also have 16 other sets, so all the mores.
Yeah, growing up, we had like one set of lead D6s, and like the corners were rounded because they were literally lead.
Oh, God.
Which probably explains why I'm with you guys here today instead of like, somewhere else.
No, you spent too much time around the Marines and your IQ dropped. That's why you're here.
Maybe that's why they put me with the Marines. I don't know.
Also,
chicken, egg.
Greg, how did we jump all the way down to the One Ring?
It felt appropriate.
I took the script and I tore it in half.
Yeah, right. You started on the One Ring and I'm going, God damn it, wait. We skipped that one, that one. God damn it, Greg.
You better keep up and pick one. Pick one quick.
Yeah, grab something.
Oh, let's see. Don't know that one. Don't know that one. Don't know that one.
Don't you dare steal words without numbers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Might as well start drinking now.
I've got dibs on that one, Greg.
Go for it. Say something intelligent.
Well, no, I was thinking more we go back to the top of the list that you ignored.
Call of Cthulhu? Oh, that's on the list.
I mean, I could keep talking unless someone else wants to take over.
I mean, you do talk well.
Let's go back to the beginning of Britain. And
so there I was at Hadrian's Wall.
It's Pendragon. This is a system that gets a surprising amount of love on the Wii. It comes up more often than I would expect, given that it really is designed around the chivalric codes of the Knights of the Round Table. And that's a very talky game for people who like to throw the rocks and hit the things with their virtual swords.
Axe diplomacy is kind of the common way, yes.
It's a variant of the basic role-playing system, but where BRP typically uses percentile dice, Pendragon scales that down to D20s. It's their design decision. I'm not going to argue it. It's all set in the Arthurian timeline, and they did a really fantastic job of researching kind of the history and the mythos to construct that. But then it has all of the famous British legendary beasts squeezed in, so you will definitely get your opportunities to explore the danger and dark wilds of ancient Britain.
And for anything that takes place in like a an actual location, like an actual historic location, one thing that I found really handy for stuff like that, there's a great website just called Old Maps Online, and basically you can select the area you want to look at, and it goes back as far back as we have maps. If it's a digitized map and it's been uploaded somewhere, it seems like it pops up.
You said Old Maps Online?
Yeah, Old Maps Online. You can like set the time scale, and I'm assuming if you looked over Britain and ran it back to pre 1750, you would see stuff dating back to. I would not be surprised if you saw stuff dating back to Lindisfarne. So just that's something that people can do for settings that take place in real locations. Utilize some of those resources that are out there because there's a lot of cool stuff out there that you can do like that.
There's the link in the chat. So your characters are represented with a number of attributes, but traits and passions are the ones that represent and control the character's behavior and allow you to exercise virtues and fight off temptation, with the goal of adhering to the chivalric code as much as possible. There aren't any PC Magic users at all, which, if you're looking for low fantasy where you don't have those fantastic elements accessible to players, there you go. Fourth edition was an exception, but we don't talk about fourth edition here.
I mean, honestly,
there's never a game that has a good fourth edition. I mean,
right near the end there, Eric,
Fire.
all I could think was, no, just a little bit of peril.
There are those who call me Tim.
I honestly,
Dang it, we had to go there.
Of course we went there. You mentioned virtue, and all I could think of was the castle Anthrax. And Robin getting dragged away going, just a little bit of peril. No, it is too perilous.
You're not worried about the boogeyman or the boggart or the brownies?
I think
How about
we're
bugbears?
About naughty zoot.
Look.
So
at least
Pendragon is going on the list of systems I should never play because I'll just Monty Python the Holy Grail my way through the entire game.
You can't be chivalric enough. That's what it is.
I mean,
it's not for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably out of the question for perhaps.
If you want to talk
about
Chimi, I do not have to take a drink for quoting Holy Grail. That's not a rule. You can't make it one now.
Unless you want to show up on the podcast more often, in which case.
If you subject yourself to the new rules, that's different.
Right. So if you want someone who's not chivalrous and not averse to taking liberties with the rules, how about Conan?
Yeah, I mean, big sword. We go from something that's just a lot of talking and a lot of chivalry to as Colin described it, axe diplomacy.
There are at least 3 Conan RPGs, but let's talk about the most recent one, which was put out by Modifius. The oldest is TSR, by the way. So talk about Red Box. It was put out in that era, but Modifius put this out in the last decade, which makes it new as far as the Weave is concerned. It's a 2d20 system, so if you're familiar with many of the other Modifius RPGs like John Carter or Achtung Cthulhu, you'll feel right at home with this 2d20 variant here. I did some research on it leading up to the episode, and the thing that I was really impressed by is that they really made it a labor of love. They put more work into describing the setting than most publishing houses would possibly put into something that is as specific as the Hyborian Age. But if you're looking for a gazetteer on everything about the world of Conan, you almost can't go wrong with this book, even though it's got RPG rules wrapped around it.
Sorry, I'm in Twitch chat
You
bringing
guys are
up.
bantering with Chimmy. Here I am talking
Yeah, I
about the
know.
You were
virtues
carrying it great. Sorry,
of Conan. It's
I
hard.
brought up the David incident.
And Howard's amazing work here, and
I'm
Yeah,
telling
he
Shimi,
great.
we're not allowed to pregame ever since the David incident.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like pre-gaming, magic in the Conan world is dark and dangerous, and it's not something that you want to touch lightly because it will taint you. It will make your soul go away.
In fairness, I think in any setting, like a warrior, like magic from a warrior's perspective, probably looks a lot like that. It's dangerous and dark and will taint you.
Relevant question. If touching the magic taints your soul, but if your character was in the military, they don't have a soul because it never got returned. So
It's on
problem is-
permanent loan,
Yeah,
so trust, it's still yours. You get it when you die.
the problem is, anyone who foolishly chooses to go that route, wouldn't have the common sense to not only not touch the magic, but would probably end up licking the magic.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I remember a second edition D&D game that I ran back in college, and one of our players ran a barbarian who came across a magic ring, and he wasn't sure what it did, but when he got in a situation where they were in trouble, he just pointed the ring at the trolls and said, "Hurt it bad." Problem was, it was a ring of meteor swarm, and they were in an underground troll lair. There were a number of dead characters.
Yeah.
cave-ins are fun, right?
If you don't know what you're dealing with, stuff can be dangerous. Whether it's just randomly using magic that you don't really understand, or licking things you're not supposed to lick. Yeah, I mean, just
The schnozberries taste like schnozberries.
I remember some of my Marines at one point eating something, and I was like, "What are you guys eating? What is that?" And it was some cactus that they plucked out of the ground and were eating. I don't know why. I was like, "You probably shouldn't be eating that." And they're like, "No, it's fine, Doc. We're good."
So yeah, I was gonna say worthwhile context insert here. Greg was a corpsman in the Navy, which means, and he was Fleet Marine Force, which means his entire job was to keep the Marines he was with from dying because they did stupid things.
Yeah, I was gonna say from their own.
Yes, keep them from
Silly.
dying from their own
Nothing
stupidity.
Nothing else can kill them, but they can kill themselves pretty damn well.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel like we should move on to either Warhammer or Worlds Without Number. I know Colin is super excited about Worlds Without Number.
Me?
So
No. No.
I don't want to take.
He's only going to go pull the compendium off the wall.
No. I got the
I can
offset
pull-
print of Worlds.
You can see mine in the background. It's.
Oh, Tiffany raises a fair point. Drink.
I already did. She saw it.
Drink.
Like it's the one right next to all my blue folders.
Did you get the first print or the offset?
The print on demand. I'm sure the offset is very nice. Don't get me wrong. But at the time, all that was available was the print on demand, and I wasn't going to rebuy it just for the offset.
Well, I did the offset on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the Kickstarter when it kicked off.
Well, Tiffany and I are the crack addicts with Well, pretty much Kevin Crawford's writing by this point, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, I think if we're going to just like talk around Worlds Without Number, you should just start talking about Worlds Without
Yes. So, Worlds Without Number is the fantasy version of Stars Without Number, effectively. Base setting wise, it's a near future, there's magic, etc. Rules wise, it is actually, unsurprisingly, okay, Stars Without Number, Worlds Without Number. Shockingly, the rules are very similar. Um, Same general lethality in the system. That is, character death is a thing. It should not be a surprise. It's a gritty setting.
Don't
Number.
go into a combat.
Yeah. So like
Why
one of
do
the
you guys do that?
one of the really cool things about Worlds Without Number, I think, is that because it is borrowed so heavily, like it's heavily inspired by like the original D&D stuff. If you have those old monsters manuals, you can basically pull stuff right out of there and plug it right in.
Oh yeah.
In fact, in their book, they explicitly say all you have to do is basically reverse THAC0 and AC, and that's it. And you can literally plug and play. So it's really cool. It comes with its own setting. I didn't use it for mine, but the setting itself it comes with sounds really cool.
Did they randomly generate the setting using the rules for setting generation?
Yeah, so that as Eric alluded to, there's rules in there to basically randomly generate your own stuff, and obviously you don't have to randomly do it, but it really helps you flesh out a setting. Truthfully, even if you're not interested in playing it, I think the world building tools for those of us who like making our own settings make the book worth it on its own, and everything else is just bonus.
Yeah, I was actually going to pull that out since I figured one of us was going to mention it anyways. You've got stuff like, terrain details that are all a d6 roll table. You've got nation construction. You've got, and I mean, there's stuff like nation construction. You've got multiple tables that build off each other. Values of the society.
As a historian, I really appreciate that basically it's like, okay, what, these are some things that define a civilization. And it talks about like what major historical events happened, what recent historical events happened, what scope were they, how do they affect people, and I think that's just it's that sort of thinking that I think really brings a setting to life. And if that's not something that you are intuitively good at, or even if you are, just organizes it in a really easy to access way. But if you're not, it's so step by step that truly anyone can do it.
Does it pass the absent wizard test?
No, nothing passes the absent wizard test.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
I love absent wizard, but God, no, nothing passes that. No. The absent wizard policy is everything can be made more granular towards simulation.
Yes.
And he has written programs.
Yeah.
To further said goals.
Aside from us nerding out about Worlds Without Number,
yes.
Tiffany brings up, like it's in the notes anyway, so we might as well say it. Like basically there's I guess a subsetting within this Worlds Without Number that's Wolves of God, building on this for a Saxon adventure in 710 in the ashes of Roman Britain, which interestingly would really put you back in the Arthurian legends setting.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to go that route with it, you absolutely could.
Be really fun to do a Varangian guard type thing, thinking about it now.
I'm just like, why isn't anyone running Wolves of God right now? Like, Tiffany, get this game started. I will make an application, and I hope you'll accept it. Like, Why isn't this? Why isn't this ad up right now? Why isn't that set up like 2 days ago?
That was a challenge. That was like a throwdown challenge right here in the middle of Weaving Myths.
In fairness, I myself have been on the receiving end of such a challenge a year, I guess maybe 2 years ago now, when you were, uh, talking about your favorite character and how you didn't get a chance to really explore him. At
And
which
he's
point,
back, baby.
he's back. I have rebooted that campaign specifically uh, on that throwdown. So.
Well, it's a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to doing more with it. But Wolves of God, oh boy. I mean, if you want to play your pious monk who's out there just to save the world from evil, check. If you want to be just a spear wielding like Saxon farmer who's out there to get the uh, get the crazies off his land, you can do that as well. It's got enough crusade feel to it that you could shoehorn adventures into just about any aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pre-Norse invasion of what we now know as the United Kingdom is one of those eras and settings that's really interesting, but isn't approached as much. Um, I'm trying to think back on my early British history, and I think this is right around the time of Alfred the Great trying to unify. Um, I think he might have been a little bit later. I'm just trying to mentally block this between like Lindisfarne, where the Vikings first make contact, and 1066.
Yeah, this is before Alfred the Great.
Hey, Greg, Tiff's telling you off.
I mean, obviously,
Wolves of
one is
God,
insufficient. Yeah, I mean, obviously one is insufficient. So we need two.
right? Two is good.
Two is good. Three is better.
Five is right out.
Five is right now. Four, you've gone too far.
Okay, we tiptoed around it, but as with all things fantasy, ultimately it comes back to Dungeons and Dragons. Sure.
You can absolutely do low fantasy in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, I mean there are rules that go with it. Just yeah.
Specifically designed around trying to strip those excess powers out, whether it's putting level caps in place or using feats and proficiencies instead of hit dice and spells. There are plenty of other growth options that you can go evaluate.
Yeah, at Mythweaver's meetup, had the opportunity to run a game, and as many of you have probably figured out, I'm kind of like a history nerd. I
No.
really like. I know, and I really like that like early American history. Um, and like I ran a game set in the 7 Years' War using Dungeons and Dragons. It was actually just before the 7 Years' War. I make that point specifically because technically, Britain and France were at peace, and my players, even though they were repeatedly reminded that they were at peace, then ambushed and murdered a diplomatic envoy from the French.
Thereby propagating the 7 Years' War.
Thereby propagating the 7 Years' War, much as
Bullshit,
Washington would
bullshit.
do.
We didn't leave survivors. We buried the bodies. You can't prove a
You
thing. We
you
didn't start
left
shit.
you left a smoking pillar for all the world to see for 20 miles around.
See, this is why I said we should have burned the bodies, but no, the one virtuous one, no, we have to give them a proper Christian burial.
You committed war crimes and probably precipitated a global conflict.
I was a French defector. I'd have to be in the military for it to be war crimes, and there was no war yet.
Then it would just have been a hanging offense.
Just been crimes.
Only if I was caught as being involved. We were out in the middle of nowhere. It's like being out in the country.
There's no
I'm not stuck
fingerprints
here
on
with
those
you,
bullets.
you're stuck here with me.
They wanted to take all the French military muskets with them.
Yes, naturally.
That would have been telling.
That might have been
Where
the clue.
did you get these 100 muskets?
There were
Nowhere.
only 5.
Yeah, but they were all French military muskets.
2 of us were French.
But you don't carry military muskets. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, you definitely
Dungeons
do.
and Dragons, there's advancement is not necessarily locked to gain 1,000 experience, gain 10 hit points, learn second level spells. You don't have to do that. You can keep people at level 1.
But it's what players expect when they are told they're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
As long as you prepare them and say, hey, this is going to be a little different. The advantage to this is that people are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. You don't have to have a bunch of people learn a whole new system. And that's the only reason I recommend it. So if you're taking a bunch of people who all know different settings, but maybe they don't have the energy to learn a whole new system, or if you're running it and you want to focus on running it and not how do I mechanically do this thing that I want to do,
Yeah.
you can absolutely take Dungeons and Dragons and just strip stuff out. And as long as you're creative about how characters grow, people just want to see their characters grow. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to start chucking fireballs.
Which is fair enough, because I have a game that is now approaching 13 years old on the Weave. And I believe, so I can check in about 2 seconds and find the exact answer for myself, that these characters are still 5th level.
You're a horrible GM.
I am.
Brief aside, Tiffany, no, tangents do not mean drinks because we don't want to die. And that's what would happen.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can play Dungeons and Dragons where it's modern day and everyone is a different kind of mythological creature, and then you're playing a White Wolf game. But anyhow,
All right, moving right along.
there's plenty of other ones. I mean, we're already at an hour,
Yep.
almost.
And we got a bunch of other stuff to cover.
We could talk about Call of Cthulhu. The Dark Ages one specifically is really a very much low fantasy without the urban fantasy elements. So if you're looking for specifically, yeah, fine. Worlds of Darkness, Monster Hearts. Yeah, look, so many options. But those tend to be more urban. And so we covered a lot of that in urban fantasy last episode, but you probably forgot because that was 2 months ago.
Was it only
Burning Wheel.
2? Damn.
2. Burning Wheel is another great system. Yeah, we actually skipped over Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing, which is very slap a coat of paint on old world Earth and call it a day. And if you want to talk about Deadly, I mean, it was descended from those miniature, wargaming miniatures where, yeah, like full battlefield units would just up and die on a given turn, and everyone said, okay. And it's got a percentile mechanic with career advancement, which is really kind of cool. I mean, there's lots good to be said about Warhammer, aside from the fact that if it's all about miniatures to you and you're on the Weave, you don't get to play with those miniatures quite as much.
I've had the thought before that like maybe we should try to do like a tabletop wargaming thing on the Weave. I think it's possible.
It can't be any worse than the idea of doing a 4X Space Empires game on the Weave.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Moving on.
Okay. Hackmaster, RuneQuest,
Burning Wheel.
the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
There's just so many options here. But let's talk about what makes a good low fantasy game. What does it for you?
for me, as I've said in many different ways throughout the night, it's all about the setting. The more detailed a setting is, the more verisimilitude, I think is how you pronounce it, but basically that feeling that this is real. I think that makes good low fantasy, where people are like, yeah, I'm just a dude who may die, and that kind of that ratchets up the tension of a lot of different encounters, both like combat wise, but also interpersonal ones.
Right. The nice thing about it being a real world with fantasy element intrusions is that those conflicts are relatable because people are human, and well, I'm a human, and I expect that Colin and Powderhorn are also both humans, and all of you watching are actually real humans.
Yes, I'm a
Um,
real human person.
but yeah, the interpersonalities of those characters and how they relate to each other is something that you can understand when you are a human person from Earth. Um, what I really like is when the fantasy is has that mystique. It's distant from you. It's removed in a way where you as the character don't know everything there is to know about it. It's not
Or,
like
or
it's not
maybe
like
even as a player, you don't know.
right. It's definitely not like D&D where you can just roll a knowledge check and learn about all that there is to know about Black Annis. When a Black Annis shows up, the shiver should run down your spine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I love low fantasy. I think there's a lot of good stuff for it. I think there's a lot of good resources out there. And for me, it really gets into what I enjoy about role playing games. That mystery, I think, is a lot of fun. Having characters and players not necessarily know what's going on. Um, my caution on that is that you know exactly why stuff works the way stuff works. For me, I start very top down. Like, this is how magic actually works. This is what the gods actually are. This is something's place in the universe and in time. Because players will ask really interesting questions. And if you don't know those higher order things, your answers may not actually fit within your setting. So if you know those things, when you get kind of a question out of left field, as you know, one of the games that I run with Eric and some other very excellent weavers, they ask some really good questions, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I have to stop and think about that for a minute. But if you're making stuff up as you go along, you may say one thing at one point and a different thing at a different point, and those two things don't square. And I promise you, your players will know.
Someone's the fastidious note taker that's gonna just poke holes in everything you do three
But
months
on
later.
June 3rd of 1997, you said that.
Yeah, I mean, on Mythweavers, like you can scroll back and be like, wait a
Mhm.
second.
The
Uh,
search feature is your foe when you're the GM, but also your salvation. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, they're asking a question about this. Let me search it up. Oh, that was that post where I said that.
yeah, thank God the search feature isn't as robust as it's about to be. What?
Yeah,
Spoilers.
yeah, we'll get to there.
Yeah.
So, what is your guys' favorite low fantasy media? Like, where do you get your references from? What do you pull from? Should you run low fantasy?
People are gonna tell me I'm a heretic when I say Tolkien, not because of that there's no fantasy in it, and not because it's a real world, but it's real enough, and it's definitely detailed enough that you can immerse yourself in it and get the verisimilitude that makes it a low power, low-ish fantasy where the fantasy elements are on the borders of what the hobbits have ever seen, on the borders of what the men of Numenor, not of Numenor, have ever seen, and that's what makes it great.
So Middle Earth, I think, is a really cool example where just because something is perhaps, see, I would argue Tolkien is high fantasy because like you have the elves and like magic is real, but just low power.
It's
Because magic
not
is
super
not,
prevalent though.
Right.
yeah,
Most men went their entire lives and never saw an elf.
that's fair.
So and
So
and it's Tolkien himself argued to his dying day that it was a low fantasy setting, and everyone else was like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's high fantasy because it's not in the
You
real
wrote
world.
it,
It's like,
but you're
no, it's
wrong.
supposed to be Europe. It's like, no, it's not Europe enough for us. We banish thee to the realm of high fantasy.
So
also known as Scandinavia.
So for me, I honestly don't really have any favorite low fantasy media that I'm likely to pull from because I'm not likely to run a low fantasy game.
And that's totally fair. Like
Yeah,
low
it's
fantasy isn't for everyone. A couple episodes, urban fantasy is not my jam. I don't do much with urban fantasy.
well, and
Um,
I mean everyone that knows, like my tendencies towards gaming knows that I tend towards sci-fi anyway. So as I'll dabble in fantasy, but it'll typically be high fantasy with me treating combat casters as, well, heavy weapons platforms.
yeah, like I said, low fantasy is not for everyone. But if it's something you've wondered about and it's something that you might be interested in, I hope you've gotten something out of this conversation. For me, low fantasy is really just taking, somehow validating all that time and money I spent getting a history degree. Because let's be
There's the
honest, it's
real
not.
power.
Yeah, it's not really good for much else. So like low fantasy, at least lets me be like, yeah, like I can come up with a pretty interesting setting. All that schooling was good for something.
Sure. Sure it
Yeah,
was.
that's what we're going with.
Exactly
Um,
what you're doing today.
yeah, exactly. Um, History has a lot of really cool examples. You can look at any historical period and do low fantasy in that period. I had the thought about doing like a World War II thing as a low fantasy, and you absolutely could.
And that's basically where you were with Indiana Jones.
Yeah, coming back full circle because that brings us back to Indiana Jones. So, like, I think it's a super flexible thing. It's easier to pull stuff from history because then a lot of the work is already done. I mentioned old maps online. Like, you can go and pull the maps, and boom, your map making is done. You can go to the history books and see interesting people. Boom, your NPCs are right there. And your players, like, if they know who these people are, it'll be a light bulb moment. And if they don't know who they are, and they find out later, it'll be a very cool light bulb moment for them.
And you can throw them at Wikipedia for just a little bit of a.
There's no such thing as a brief Wikipedia visit.
It's true. Do you want to talk? Do you want to shift over to the game of the episode?
Yeah, we need to get moving.
Yeah, let's keep going. All right. Colin, are you ready to do the honors?
Transition. Hey, I remembered to click it.
Transition, you remember to click it? Oh, that's amazing.
Oh,
Today's
die in a
game of the
fire.
episode is The Beast of Gita. This is a one-shot game looking for 3 to 5 players to come join the wonderful game master, Butchern, using the Dungeon World system in a very abbreviated format. The players are going to take up the roles of heroes that live in the town of Pemigal and are willing to assist an inexperienced priest of Pelor and a mysterious inquisitor from out of town as they investigate rumors of a priest casting dark magics nearby. It's going to be a fast-paced game. It actually says three posts a week, which, yeah, if you read most of the advertisements, people are like, post a day, and you say, that will never happen. But
Yeah.
3 posts a week, if she holds that, will actually be pretty fast paced.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading over it, the goal is for it to be kind of a one shot that finishes before Christmas. And honestly, I think one shots on the weave are something that are worth exploring.
Yes.
Everyone wants to do like a big long campaign, but not every game has to be that.
Right.
So consider running a one shot.
Yeah.
What would typically be a one shot. Consider running that for a few months and just have fun with it.
Yeah. Applications close on August 28th, so you've basically got a week to get your apps in, and then 4 months. So we're talking 12-ish posts. Ooh, this is a this is definitely ambitious to Tiff's point.
Well, and so yeah, I will say, so this is being run by Butchern. If you are not familiar with Butchern, she is
Run
both.
now.
Yeah, leave B alone. She's one of my favorites. But
She's super
yeah,
cool.
like Chimi said, it really is a 3 posts a week. If you do not meet that, she will drop you. But she is also a very experienced play-by-post DM/GM on Mythweavers.
Mainly with Fate, but Dungeon World, there's a lot of similarities in style
Yeah.
with Fate.
But yeah, it's one of those things. So when she's saying 3 posts a week, she's choosing what she knows is a fast pace without being a hey, we're gonna burn out in a month pace.
Because that one post a day will burn people out in a month,
Oh
or
my
you will
god,
have,
so
or you
quick.
you have a dropout rate that's so high that you're just back to recruiting within a month.
Yeah.
And it is worth noting in the ad, it mentions that the goal is to, it's okay, you run the entire thing and it takes place in a day in game time. It's not some huge week long in the game plot.
I know on the notes here we kind of go over to the free for all next. But I wonder if maybe it would be better to talk about the two things after that and then come back to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna do those and then yes.
Yeah. So anyway, get those apps in. You've got a week, then you got a sprint. But trust us when we say that it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Butcher knows her stuff as far as storytelling and pacing and yeah. Alright, so we're gonna come back to the free for all. So first off, Mythweaver's Meetup Kalamazoo has just recently passed. That was July 24th and 25th. We
If you were
had
there, we hope you had a good time. If you weren't there, man, we're hoping to see you next year.
You missed it. It was a great time.
So we had 25 bodies came out. We had pen and paper RPGs going. We had board games going. We had table where people just hanging out and chatting.
There were
Eric,
card games going.
there were card games going. Eric was just holding up the one of the door giveaways for the badges. The badges all came with potion bottles.
Where's my
Um,
badge?
Everyone got a healing potion except me. They chose to give me the only poison bottle.
Poison.
I did not know that.
It's like they were sending a message to me. Something about
Right.
recruitment and conscription and things.
Huh.
So
Anyway,
it was
I have
a
no
great
idea
time.
why, but okay.
We had food cooked on site by the staff. Next year we're probably looking at catering options just to give people a break from slaving away in the kitchen.
there was a lot of slaving away in the kitchen.
It and the kitchen was hot. But oh yes, potion bottles made by EDH, and I don't know the random string of numbers she uses, but
She does it because we changed her nickname finally.
yes.
A true friend would have done that sooner. Now it goes by Danny.
That's right, yes. I forgot we changed that. So yes, Danny did those, Dingmamon's wife. They are awesome.
Danny-rific.
So, yeah, it was a great time. We already have the next one is scheduled for June 25th and 26th, 2022 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So start planning now if you're interested in attending. Badges are going to be $50 again for both days. And right now I'm working on, there's a hotel right next door to the venue that's a decent hotel. We're going to be looking into getting room blocks so that the lodging is cheaper. We're going to have details coming out more completely in about the next month so people can plan.
Yep. Family's welcome. I had my 2 kids there. They had a great time. They participated in games. They participated in games even when I wasn't involved. So that tells you that they were having a good time.
Also,
Yes.
Eric's daughter is a savage.
Yeah, she really is.
Like,
Why Kalamazoo? It's venue. We have a specific venue that we have available for the size of group that we're doing now. We have some expectations that come 2023, we're going to outgrow that venue. And at that point,
God willing.
sky's the limit.
No, it'll probably be Grand
Vegas,
Rapids.
baby!
But Matt, the summarized version is the event happens at my VFW post, and they cut us a slight deal on the rental fee.
And, for better or for worse, Kalamazoo is relatively central.
It's
You
near
know, so-
Chicago, Detroit, and Grand Rapids, yes.
Yeah, like some people definitely fly in, but a lot of the people drove. So it isn't driving distance for a lot of people coming from both from east, south, and west. Obviously, because of everything going on in the world, nobody from the northern border was able to come over. But I think in the future that will also be an option.
Yes. And then
Yep.
part of it as well is, well, you have to have someone on the ground in the area crazy enough to actually organize it, and hi, that's me. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, speaking
It was
speaking
really
of,
solid.
yeah,
Day and a half worth of fun.
yes,
speaking of Mythweavers meetup, there was a big announcement that happened. I think
yes.
most people have probably heard about it by now, but this is the first podcast since that happened.
So yeah, so we revealed. Well, Eric, you want to take it? You've been the one hammering at
Yeah,
the
why don't
code
I
the most.
just drop the link in here in the chat. But Project Balder, which is one of the great redacted projects that the staff always hinted about but never told anyone what it was, when it would drop,
For a
and
year and a
whether they
half,
would
we've been teasing.
care about it. Ultimately, Project Balder is a full website upgrade from the ground up for Mythweavers. It's replacing the ancient vBulletin architecture that we're running on with a much more modern one run by Envision Community, which as a coder, it's such a breath of fresh air to step away from band-aids and just tape, string, and MacGyvering the site to keep it running, and actually working on all of those cool features that everyone for the last I've been on staff for 10 years, that they've been hammering at us.
Why can't
Wouldn't
you
it be
do
great
this?
if?
Could we do that? Could we?
Yes. So
If we weren't on
this is
here,
the
yes.
platform on which those dreams will come true. We're
Bite your
working
tongue,
through our closed
Tiffany.
beta phase. Working on that closed beta right now. We're finishing up feature implementation debugging. In fact, if you watch that thread, there's questions and answers going on, and in some cases there's me inserting myself saying, yeah, that was a great idea, we should try that. 2 hours later, oh yeah, that's turned on, it was good. Yeah,
Yeah,
the whole idea of, hey, my modern web browser allows me to, with my mobile phone, to ask for push notifications, and I get them. Why can't I have that from the Weave? Yes, you have that now. As soon as the open beta hits, it'll be there for you. As soon as we get through and debugging them, making sure, and writing the documentations that you know what you're doing, we're going to get an open beta out there on the street. But Colin and I haven't put a date on it because life. I mean, it's only been a month since we did meetup. And I'll be
Yeah,
quite honest, it was an exciting scramble just to get to all of those features just to roll it out at Meetup.
that's what he calls missing sleep and programming instead.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, pretty much.
we will be. I'm sorry, Greg, you were saying something or attempting to say
Oh,
something.
I was just playing choir to Eric there.
So we will be over the rest of season 5, which is going to run a little longer than usual this year because we got to make up all the missed episodes. Um, we will be like this little block right now where we're talking Mythweavers Meetup, Kalamazoo, and Project Boulder is going to turn into, hey, let's answer some questions about Boulder. Let's, showcase a feature or a new shiny feature, whatever, with Boulder. We're going to start inserting little bits about the podcast, or not the podcast, the website revision on here.
Live Q&A is what I just heard.
Live Q&A as well. So we're going to have that, and then some point in the next couple weeks, I'm going to try to get together a milestone tracker because Eric and I have put together milestones anyway. We're going to make a visual, like what needs to be done until open beta just so people can see what's actually involved versus us going, "Oh, we're close."
Yeah, I don't want close. So, um, hey Colin, you want to do a little experiment right now?
No.
Come on.
I mean, I will, but no.
So bring up your web browser
Uh-huh.
and switch to the test website.
Version 4.6.5.1 of Envision Community is now available. Why haven't you updated, Eric?
Well,
All
we'll
right.
talk about that when we talk about what's making us happy this week.
Uh-huh. Here.
Um,
Should I
but
put this up on the website so they can
yeah,
see?
you should definitely show the people who are watching.
All right.
And go to site discussion under Welcome to Mythweaver 6.0. There's a thread that I posted in called Ha Ha.
Hmm.
And that post is a copy paste of an article from Wikipedia. If you were to find the bottom of that post and click on the edit button.
I hate you already.
Yeah. So it's way at the bottom. You found it? Good to go?
Okay.
All right.
Edit.
So now the toolbar has a new button at the second row there at the bottom right called Source. Click on that button. So for all of you who are like, I've got to do the code thing. I can't live without BB code or the ability to directly modify my stuff. Yes, you can. But obviously it's going to have to fit within whatever HTML sanitization we do. So there are rules, and if you break those rules, your posts will look like crap. But they won't break the site anymore. And that's the part that I care about.
I know there's going to be people out there that do this, but wow.
But if you click cancel and you just go back to the regular editor, it is strictly speaking a fully featured what you see is what you get editor. It's got
Yes.
spoilers. It's got like in post pagination if you really have to go that far. Pretty much anything that you could do with the old site you can do with the new site. There's I think two most requested features that we're still looking at implementing. But for the most part, the editor is done. The only feedback that I got was, hey, when I switched to the mobile version of the editor, because it's inherently mobile friendly, you forgot to load all the buttons for me. So I just did that this week. The mobile version of the editor now has all the buttons, so you can do all the things.
Hey, Eric, the pagination didn't just automatically transfer.
It's got to be something. There's always something. Anyhow,
Just saying, latest bug report. All right, anyways. Yeah, so we're going to be discussing this.
We did the discussion. Now it's time for the free-for-all.
Yes. So, free-for-all. If you've been around, you know the rules. If you don't know the rules, free-for-all, we answer questions, generally talk about anything and everything. But, of course, we must first answer the question, what's making us happy this week? And apparently we're starting with me. What's making me happy this week is we just got the paddles, like a better set of paddles for Tandem Kayak. Pretty pumped about that because one
The
of
kayak that tips over in the water?
it did not tip.
Yep. Just sinks straight down.
Oh, it just went straight down. The cockpit on that Tandem Kayak is too long. It can't handle the gentle Class 2 rapids. Just because you go over, and then the nose drops and goes underwater before it hits the rapids with the rest of the body. Yeah.
Loosh.
Yeah, we sank hard. But new paddles, because one of the sets of paddles is it looks like canoe paddles, like with the blade profiles strapped on either end of the shaft, and it's horrible. So now we're done with that. Eric, what's making you happy?
This week needs to die in a fire. This was a bad week. But
Yeah.
I showed you the one thing that I managed to do. I did get my third shot of the COVID vaccine. That was probably one of the highlights, although the days after that sucked. The second dose response effects, it was kind of worse with the third dose. So for those of
Your
you who
system
are
responded harder. That's not a bad thing.
that's what it was supposed to do. But for those of you who are staring down the eventuality of a potential booster shot, just fair warning, it's gonna
I'm
be fun.
sorry, all I heard is feel a little sick and a little sore and get a couple days off work at the same time.
Oh no, I did it over the weekend. That was my fault.
See, that was not my
Failed.
experience with the second round. I also did it over the weekend, and
I just
I'm
felt
very
really
happy.
sore the first day
Yeah.
after.
Either way, I'm super happy that I was able to get both doses. If a third one is called for, then I'll do that too. I do highly recommend it to everyone because that's how we get to do things like Mythweaver's meetup. Uh, you know, so
I mean,
luckily
and
we're able.
all three of us in this podcast can vouch for the fact that we received 43 immunizations in about 60 seconds in the military. And some of those, God, some of the stuff we received, anthrax is still not approved for civilian use.
I mean, like I gave myself the smallpox vaccine. Like I had to sit there with the
Of
little
course you
two
did.
tiny pen and just like
Yep.
because that's how you do smallpox. That's just how that goes. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. Please, 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 please get vaccinated. If you have strong opinions on it, happy to talk to you about them offline. But
Me too.
whatever I can convince you.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So,
Um,
Greg, what are you happy about?
much like Eric, it's actually been a pretty rough week for us. So for me, it's been more just kind of doing some video gaming stuff. Was nice. Was home a lot more this week than I typically would be because my wife's been sick. Um, so like I checked out that Hades game, which is like a lot of fun. It's like this small little roguelike, but it's really, really well done.
Yay,
Well,
roguelikes.
yeah, like it's a Greek myth roguelike where you're playing like the son of Hades. Uh, and I kind of can't go more into it than that because there's like some interesting plot points.
Fair.
But yeah, it's cool. It's fun. Been playing a lot of Elder Scrolls Online lately, just because I like the set. I'm all about settings. I think Tamriel's a cool setting. Created a character called
Fair.
the Tamriel Health Inspector, which looks stunningly like me, which I think should be a lot of fun to just kind of play around with and ask people who are cooking if they have their food handling certificates, stuff like that.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I mean, why
Why?
not?
Why wouldn't he? I mean, this
Yeah,
sounds perfectly normal to me.
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
All right. So that done with, we have
I think
a
that's it.
question. One.
We have a question.
We have a question from Chimi, because of course we do. What is Grok's favorite thing about Baldur? Eric?
Brock's favorite thing about Baldur is that he's currently the face of the
Oh,
placeholder for
that's
stat blocks.
true.
That if we get to the point of doing stat blocks, that everyone will see Grok's face until they replace it with their own stat block.
Yes, the or I guess I should say there's the dice tower, and then there's another tab on the right side of the post to switch to stat blocks. The current plan is to have customizable stat blocks that pull from your character sheet for that specific game.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome if it works. We'll make it work.
I was going to say, you're involved, Eric. You'll somehow make the complicated stuff work in half an hour, and the simple stuff you'll be at for a week and a half.
I'm guessing he's about to do more work on 6.0 because I see him taking caffeine at like 9:30 at night.
Got to
He,
counterbalance here.
yeah, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Oh,
Questions,
YouTube chat.
yo. Need some more foot
Nothing.
bites.
We scared them all away.
Yeah, I think that covers it, which is probably a good thing because we are running later than perhaps most people expected.
Well, we
Holy
spent
cow.
about 5 minutes just rambling at the start, so it's really more like an hour and a half on the nose.
Yeah, that's a pretty good episode then.
Yeah, like we're ending at the same time we usually do. We just actually started on time.
Gary. I mean, that's probably where no one is. Like they're getting ready to show up now, and we're like, we're done.
Eric?
There's a question.
Are there any simple reactions like thumbs up in Baldur? So we specifically turned off the kind of reputation +1 system.
Because we've been
that was a
down that
conscious
road.
decision.
Yeah, it lends itself to clicks and people basically being like, I like you, but I don't like you. And that's just not the community we want.
Right. The challenge is that most of the systems that build that into, say, a forum or a Facebook wall or what have you, are designed around the concept that you're not going to be providing any other content, and we're going to calculate a score based on how many of those positive feedbacks you get. We couldn't turn off the ability to say, yeah, +1, I agree, good job, without also turning off the reputation system. Or conversely, we couldn't turn off that score without turning off the ability to +1 a post.
Okay, so just a simple acknowledgement. Short of doing a quick post with like a thumbs up emoji, no, there's not a way to do that.
Although the posts are fully UTF compliant, therefore you should be able to post that thumbs up emoji and it will actually work.
Yes. But yeah, it's so even just an acknowledgement thing. So worth mentioning on here, we at one point back in 2010, at one point we tried the upvote downvote thing. And it was a horrific disaster, and we killed it in a couple months. And then we tried to do upvote only, and turns out you can brigade even the upvote only system. So the problem is, even like a simple acknowledgement reaction system built into that is equivalent to pretty much the upvote only method. It's the same effective mechanic, and unfortunately, experience has shown that will still find a way to be abused.
It's sad but true.
Yeah. That being the last question, I think that kind of puts us towards the denouement here.
Final questions, last chances,
Well,
at least for this episode.
and worth noting, we will be after this going to Weaving Myths After Dark on the Discord.
Oh,
Indeed.
I didn't realize that.
You don't have to
Yeah,
if you don't want to,
I
but
just
you
you're
want to
always
be
can.
welcome.
I'm so hungry.
Always join us. Join us.
One of us. One of us.
Join us.
This
Part of
sounds
the
this
ship,
sounds like a
part
sort
of
of
the
cult
crew,
that a
part of the ship,
Arthurian
part of the
legend
crew.
an Arthurian legend should be rooting out to maintain that chivalrous code.
You can talk about it being a cult all you want, but you joined it willingly.
I don't know. I think it's temporary still, isn't it?
That's
So it's
cute
the
that you
death of
still
the
say
universe.
temporary. All right, Eric,
All right.
take us out.
Before we wrap up the show, I just want to remind everyone that Weaving Myths is made possible by our Patreon. If you'd like to support us and get access to the sweet, sweet rewards available to you, definitely consider signing up. If you didn't catch us live, don't forget that you can post on Myth Waivers, on Facebook, on Twitter with corrections, questions, or other general correspondence, or in any case, email us at weavingmythspodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you and can't wait to read your questions online and answer them and make fun of them. I'm Eric, and I've been joined tonight by the magnificent Colin
Bye, everyone. Don't mind Eric.
and Powderhorn.
It was a pleasure talking with y'all. I look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks for listening, and keep on weaving those myths.